Hey guys, Tyler here. I wanted to make a video on footwork in HEMA as the first thing you should learn in HEMA, but then I realized actually there's something you should learn before that at Mr. Max's behest. And that's what exactly is HEMA. To some of you that may go without saying. There may be the sort of tacit knowledge of, well, it's fighting in the medieval way with, long swords and all that. Well, no. It's fighting in the medieval and Renaissance way with a variety of weapons. Well, yes, and also no. And it's Viking reenactment. Yup. And pugilism and wrestling and small sword fencing and Napoleonic era saber fencing and Napoleonic era bayonet fencing, and it's World War I trench fighting drills, and it's HEMA is a kind of terrible acronym that was never supposed to get out of a small group of friends in England, between Matt Easton of Scala Gladiatoria and Oz of English martial arts and a few others that just sort of came up with a loose term that was supposed to be refined later, and the refining later has never happened. Some groups have broken off into historic, like Napoleonic era martial arts, like NEMA, I think is the acronym for that. But you can look at HEMA and be very bewildered if a school simply labeled themselves as HEMA, or even worse, in my opinion, Western martial arts. Yes, I love the guys at Simbrogi. They taught me a lot, but Western martial arts is so vague. Yeah, I mean, we've even gotten rid of the historical and European parts of it. So now we're including, modern boxing, Dutch kickboxing, American South rough and tumble, all sorts of crap. You really have no idea if you're going to show up. If somebody just says, we're doing HEMA, I can make an assumption that we're doing longsword, but I may show up and we're doing rapier. I may show up and we're doing dagger. I may show up and we're doing wrestling. I may show up and we're doing pugilism. So if you show up expecting longsword, and a guy, hands you these light leather, what we'd call today bag gloves, and we start doing some bag work and, practicing our 1-2s, you'd be disappointed. Even if you're into that, you'd be a little bewildered that that's what we're doing, right? So I think the first thing that's important to do is figure out what exactly do you want from HEMA. Are you interested in the longsword? That's what most people are interested in. Are you interested in rapier, etc.? But find out what you want to do, and then, if you can, find a school near you that can do it. If you can't find a school, find people that are interested in doing it with you. If you can't find either of those, get the stuff to do it, and just do solo drills. And that's what I hope to make I don't know how long, maybe, on and off series, where maybe when my club can't meet, or just I'm feeling like it, maybe I'm doing my solo drills around the house and I feel like filming myself, do some solo drills along with me. And I'll try to incorporate some single sword, some long sword, maybe some unarmed stuff as well. Although wrestling is hard to demonstrate solo, and grappling dummies are really expensive or unsatisfying. If anyone has a good grappling dummy with arms that aren't like T-Rex arms, I don't know why so many are like that, let me know. Preferably something that doesn't break the bank. Yeah, so that would be my first thing. Learn what it is you want to do. And it doesn't need to be specific. It doesn't need to be, I want to learn specifically German longsword or Italian longsword. I started with Fiore's longsword system, Italian longsword, and I don't practice that anymore. Now I practice and teach under Joachim Meyer, the later 16th century fencing master. So I went from late medieval to pretty much middle of the Renaissance. Middle of the Renaissance, early Renaissance. Depends on who you ask. That's mainly what I would suggest. Just do your research. Figure out what exactly it is you want to get out of HEMA. That way, too, when you're asking around, when you're telling friends, oh, let's do HEMA, you have a clear understanding of what it is. And you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. You don't have to say, you're right, I'm doing longsword, I'm only going to do longsword. But this can help you not get into the trap of, ooh, I want a longsword. And then you get a longsword trainer. And then you're like, ooh, I want a rapier. And then you get a rapier trainer. And ooh, I want to do dagger. And then, well, okay, dagger's pretty cheap. But, you go on and on and on. And it becomes this huge money sink of you buying a million trainers and never actually training with, you're never actually getting good with any one of them very much. Whereas if you focus very specifically at the beginning on one thing, you can lay the framework, a foundation for learning the other stuff. This is the basis behind Meyer's system. He effectively teaches every weapon like he teaches longsword. Now, there are clear differences between the weapons. A one-handed weapon is going to be different than a two-handed weapon, right? But he wants to lay the framework with longsword and then teach you everything else now that you've already got the framework. Fiore, similarly, he wants to teach you wrestling first and then teach you everything else now that you know how to wrestle. That way you don't panic when you get into that close-in engagement and your sword's not useful anymore. You don't panic when you're whacking a guy in armor and your sword is not an effective tool at dealing with armor. That's a big difference in context, too. Understand how these treatises are written. Meyer is writing very explicitly for unarmored dueling. Fiore talks about unarmored dueling, but he shows a lot of armor as well, and he's always saying, keep in mind, this might not work. If the guy's wearing armor, if the guy's armor is better made than you expected it to be, whatever the case might be, right? So context is very important here. As viewers of Mad Easton are well aware. The second thing that I would recommend learning as far as HEMA is what you yourself want to get out of it. There are like three main reasons people will take a martial art: fun, fitness, and they want to be really good at fighting. I would split fun actually into like personal fulfillment, because there can also be a spiritual aspect, a sort of deeper idea that a man or even a woman, a person should be capable of defending themselves to truly be considered an individual. I won't go too much into that, but I think there's a lot of merit there. The fitness one, these first two, the personal fulfillment and fitness, you can accomplish absolutely by yourself at home. You don't need anybody else with you. If the third one is your goal, though, if you truly want to be good at fighting, if you want to be good at competition, these are two distinct things, unfortunately. Lots of tournaments will not allow grappling at all, or they won't allow ground fighting. Ground fighting is even rarer than allowing grappling, which is dumb because even in unarmored fights, there is a lot of grappling. As I said, Fiore literally tells you, learn wrestling first, then learn the rest of it. George Silver, he tells you, against two rapiers, the better wrestler is going to win. That's my aside. So you want to win tournaments, you want to be good at fighting just for, fighting's sake. Whatever the case may be, you need a sparring partner. And I know that's very difficult for a lot of people. It was very difficult for me for many years. I had to take a 2 or 3 year hiatus from any sparring or anything, simply because it was very difficult for me to find people that were willing to. They were like, oh yeah, that seems super cool, let's get into it. And I'm like, all right, so you'll need a mask, you'll need gloves. I already have a spare sword, and by the time they see $150, and these are college students, of course, they go, they're out. And now the economy is even worse than it is, so you'll need a mask, gloves, and your sparring simulator of choice. That's minimum to spar. To do like some very basic, very slow, just touch demonstrations with each other, all you need is your sparring simulator of choice by itself. So those are some considerations before we actually get into moving around the footwork, any of that. Let me know if that was helpful. It's kind of a meta discussion, a primer to the series I'm going to be going into next, maybe later this week even, but definitely by next week. I hope to have a footwork video. And then after the footwork video, maybe how to hold a sword. I'll be focusing on German longsword, but giving some nods to other areas as well. All right, thanks. Let me know what else you'd like to see in this field or in anything on this channel, as always.